ruling against IEBC. There is the tender of the ballot papers. They had identified Inform Lycos, a Greek firm based in Athens, that was to print ballot papers and statutory results declaration forms and other materials that would be needed for the election. Now, the board says that IEBC needs to reconsider, to reevaluate, to go back to the reevaluation stage because there were some unfair issues that were pointed out. Let's take a look at some of the brief that came from that release. We accordingly find and hold that the applicant was disqualified from financial criteria unfairly and or based on a criterion that was not set out in the IEBC tender document. Of course, one of those petitioners were like the Al Ghurair company that printed ballot papers in 2017. The letter of award for the supply and delivery of ballot papers, register of voters and election results declaration forms on a framework contract for a period of 3 years to Inform Lycos SA is hereby nullified and set aside. Then something else that happened is that IEBC is hereby ordered to direct the evaluation committee to readmit Al Ghurair's tender at the financial evaluation. And then something else that happened is that IEBC is ordered to conduct a re-evaluation of all tenders that made it to the financial evaluation stage, at the financial evaluation stage in accordance with the provisions of the tender document. And Dr. Chris Omala, this is not the first time we're hearing this. Earlier in the year, there was the election technology tender that had been nullified by the PPRB. Someone went to the High Court and that decision was reversed and IEBC cleared to go ahead with the evaluation stage. I mean, we've seen this before, including in 2017, and the printing of ballot papers for the presidential election were actually not cleared until very late in July. We weren't clear on how we're going to get those ballot papers. So are you surprised? And as we go into this, what must IEBC do now, knowing that there will be all these tender wars, yet they have their own timelines and considerations to make?
Thank you for the good question. But before I answer, just allow me for 1 minute, because you are discussing something very critical that the other panelists have talked about, but I was not given an opportunity. So if you allow me for a second.
You're actually the first one to talk about it, Dr. Chris Omala.
Yeah, in terms of the integrated plan, you know, it's a requirement actually, every county must have that master plan. And it's important that when you come in as a new governor, don't just come and come up with the new projects. I know the issue is about issues of accountability, and my advice is, I think we have the auditors. It's good to have auditors to evaluate those particular projects, so you be able to get what challenges were there. But it's important, as my colleagues have really pointed out, you know, in our constitution now, any decision you come up with, there must be public participation. So whatever was put in that integrated plan, they're the same citizens who are there. So how I wish my colleagues, the new governors who are coming, God willing, it's good to continue with those particular projects that were started by your predecessors. Because if you don't continue with them, it will be a waste. Right. For example, in Trans Nzoia County, we have a referral hospital which has been going on for the last 8 years. And when you look at the financial allocation, it has been funded almost 100%. But when you go on the ground, you find the project is maybe only 50% done. So I think audits have to be done. And in that process, you can be able to know where to start. Okay. But it's important to prioritize. Look at President Uhuru. And I salute President Uhuru, because he actually followed through the projects of President Kibaki. And President Kibaki's projects, all these, were projects which came through the government of, at that time, the Hafumkate government, because they came up with, there was this issue of the Vision 2030. All our plans are actually aligned to the Vision 2030, the long-term one. So we have the long-term plans, we have the mid-term plans. So when you come in, whether you're a new governor, whatever the case, it is good to align yourself with the projects of your predecessor so that you'll be able to complete for the benefit of the common Manainji. That's what I wanted to say. Now, coming back to the issue of the IEBC, this is a very controversial matter. And in the last general election, Sam, we had a similar issue of people going to court. At a time like this matter of procurement should have been put on stop. But when you look at what, there is some of the reasons that have been given by the review board. To me, in my own interpretation, I find some are insignificant. And I have no doubt, whoever was awarded that tender is likely to go to the High Court. So we are going to have all this to and fro. And as you do this, IEBC will not be able to prepare properly for the issue for the elections. How I wish on a matter like this, that should have started early enough so that it is resolved. Because these guys, obviously, will go to court, and we're not sure whether IBC, of course, IBC is obligated to go as per the rule of law, but they can also go to the High Court to challenge that. Right. So the issue is it's a wastage of time. And as we move on, this will impact negatively on the preparation of IBC for purposes of having free and fair elections. But our law is clear, yes. If somebody is not convinced, you can go to the High Court. Can you imagine you go to the High Court, from the High Court maybe go to the Court of Appeal, even you find this matter might go up to the Supreme Court. And all this in the long run will affect the preparation of the IEBC. So this is the big question we have. But in my own interpretation, if I look at some of the reasons given, I find they're insignificant. Insignificant,
you say. Yet, Honorable Buyu, they are binding unless there's a successful challenge, because that's why people have put, the Kenyans have put those measures in place. So what is this that IEBC must do?
First of all, I don't think the reasons put forward are insignificant, because procurement laws, when you procure or when you set out a tender, you've already outlined all that you expect an applicant to have, or to have as a qualification. And when midstream, when people have already submitted their tenders, their applications and their tenders, and then you come up with you come up with something. For example, I was listening to you, watching your station news last night. I think it was 40% or something of
local content.
Yes, which now they were required to have, which had not been indicated. Because if it's indicated right from the start, then if I don't have it, I don't apply. But then you cannot introduce laws or rules midstream of a tendering process, you know. So what I think IEBC should do is they must be keen in everything that they do, because they must realize, like Mheshimiwa says, that they don't have time. Elections is next year, August. Procurement takes a lot of time. So they just must be keen in everything they do in terms of procuring. Because again, what that does is it takes away confidence, people's confidence in IEBC. And we are not at a point where we want to think that IEBC is incompetent or IEBC is playing games, because this is a very delicate exercise, and we know what this can lead to. People might begin to think that IEBC is favoring a particular provider for other reasons, you know, and when that is implanted in people's mind, then it begins to erode people's confidence in the electoral process, which is a danger. But IEBC, given that the timelines are so strict, they must be very, very keen, and they must pay attention to every detail in anything they do from now, because they do not have the time. Yes.
And Senator Kangata, in 2017, IEBC was forced to do direct procurement for some of the services that were required for the election. It is because of these delay, should I say delay tactics that are occasioned by the tender wars. I mean, how then do we convince Kenyans that we have laws that can actually apply? We have an avenue of open tendering, but it always faces all those hurdles of challenges, whether it's at the board or even at the High Court, and end up at the direct procurement, which is pretty not competitive. How do you convince Kenyans in preparing for an election and objectivity of the process?
Yes, from where I sit, I think it is the right of any company or any person to challenge a tender award. I would urge Kenyans not to see that process as impugning the credibility of the elections of 2022. It is part of our open and democratic culture to challenge decisions of public entities, IEBC included. It's also the right of an aggrieved party to lodge a complaint before that procurement review board, and therefore that has nothing to do with the preparations for 22 elections. The only thing probably we could have done is to start the process of procurement a little bit early, so that if there are any challenges, they could have been done, let's say, 1 year before the elections of 2022. Alternatively, is you give up a tender which is long-term in nature, that may run into 2 election cycles, so that it's clear by the time you are going to the next general elections, which entity is going to provide with us with procurement with various materials for elections, and we don't open that process to litigation too close to an election. Yeah.
And actually, I'm looking at the ballot papers tender. It was advertised and was closing on 14th of July 2021. So that's just slightly over 1 year to the election. For the election technology, it was first advertised in April of 2021, but eventually closed in June of 2021, again more than 1 year to the election. And Speaker Kipto, are these concerns that people in Nandi County are dealing with, or have they changed their focus to the political class? And how then do we get Kenyans involved in all this matter so that eventually when people are crying foul about IEBC and the processes, Kenyans also have a stake in what they know about these processes?
I think as a country we need to revisit the report that was commissioned by the Kriegler Commission, and the underlying conclusion of the report was that election is a process. The moment we conclude one election, we must start preparing for the next election. But as history has judged us very harshly, elections in Kenya are shambolic basically because we don't prepare. We finish an election, it is challenged in the Supreme Court, that being the presidential petition, together with the other downstream ballot petitions, that is from governor to MCA. And by the time we are done with the first 2 years, there's a clamor for removal of the commissioners or the change of membership of the commission, whether secretariat or the commission itself. So the end product is that we find ourselves in this kind of quagmire, whereby the procurement or tender wars go into the last 6 months of the election. So it would not be surprising if the next elections again suffer the same fate of 2017, 2013, and this one comes after the advent of the new IEBC, away from the previous ECK. Now, the residents, and from my observation, the citizens trust institutions only if the institution perform. So if you come to Nandi County, you don't find conversation or apprehension about IEBC at this point. But as we go towards the election, the same apprehension will rear its ugly head from the time of nominations. If the parties fail to handle nomination properly, and as we go to the general election, and being a resident of Nandi County, now that a leading presidential contender in the name of His Excellency Dr. William Ruto coming from this side, you are sure that the antenna will be up and people will be keen to see, do we have an IEBC that can stand on fairness? So my proposal would be, I think the National Assembly and the Senate can seize on this opportunity. By the time we finish December, IEBC should have finished its processes, especially on matters procurement of ballot papers, setting up processes. But if you come to the field, there's also an issue of apathy. I'm sure you noticed that people did not register as anticipated. I have a case, for example, in Nandi County. County Assembly of Nandi donated its motor vehicles to help mobilize. But we could go for a whole day and you'd only get 2 to 10 voters registering. So that tells you the apathy. There is serious apathy from the citizens, and I think it's not just Nandi, it is across the region, across the republic, and it is basically a case of limited confidence on the current IEBC. My proposal is that let's focus on solution. The solution is that between now and January, we must set in place everything, starting with the closure of these tender wars that we have on matters ballot papers, on matters the KIMS kits, and all what you have.
All right, Speaker, there's something you said there that is pretty interesting, and you'll touch on later on, that you think Kenyans have lost confidence in IEBC, that's why they're not coming out to vote. I don't know whether it's that, or it's voter apathy, or it's because of the disappointment in the leadership or the management of the country, mostly, of course, by politicians. I have 4 of them on set. We'll talk about that after the break, as you also talk about the early campaigns. Deputy President William Ruto has claimed that he's not engaging in early campaigns. He's listening to the people and their feedback on how the country is being governed. We'll talk about that. You can text in your views to 22422, Twitters at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is the break. After the break.